Steam was rising from my coffee mug when I heard it. The bark, the scramble, the silence. 10 minutes later, I would be dangling from a helicopter, not for a war, not for a mission, but because a woman with a clipboard refused to unlock a gate. And Barnaby was clinging to a cliff. You don't expect your day to fall apart over a squirrel. Especially not when you're retired, your knees make more noise than your pickup, and you've finally trained your dog to bark only at actual threats, or so you thought. But there we were, me and Barnaby, on a Tuesday that started like any other. Calm, slow, predictable. The kind of day you earn after 6 decades of waking up too early and going to bed too tired. The kind of day you don't want ruined by nonsense. But this is America. And in modern America, nothing ruins a man's peace like the HOA. Barnaby was doing his usual morning patrol, tail up like a proud little flag, when he saw it, the enemy. A squirrel, bold and twitchy, scampering across the top of the ridge behind our house like he owned the damn place. Barnaby took off like a 4-legged bullet, barking like the proud protector he believed himself to be. I didn't panic. He does this 3 times a week. The squirrel disappears, he pees on a bush, we go inside. It's our little ritual. But today, the squirrel decided to fight back. I'm not saying it threw something at him, but I swear I saw that furry bastard hesitate, look back at Barnaby and taunt him. Maybe I'm losing it. Maybe not. Either way, Barnaby didn't stop. He cleared the retaining wall like a Marine, paws thumping the gravel trail just beyond our backyard. My heart gave a slow, annoyed thud. That trail ran right along the cliffs, and there was a reason the HOA put up that metal gate with the padlock. A reason they'd printed NO unauthorized access, HOA use only, in angry red font. Because beyond that gate, the earth drops, fast and hard, into a rocky ravine that even the deer avoid. And of course, the gate was locked. I dropped my mug. Coffee splashed over my slippers. I grabbed the keys from the hook. Wrong keys. I grabbed my phone. Slippery. I missed the screen 3 times before the emergency call screen lit up. I could already hear Barnaby barking, yelping, a sound I hadn't heard since the firecracker incident 2 years ago. I ran, or rather, I old man shuffled with purpose toward the trail. And when I got there, I saw it. Barnaby was hanging. Not off the cliff, not quite, but damn near. His front paws were scrabbling against a slope of jagged rock. His leash wrapped around a dead bush, and his hind legs. They were kicking the air, swinging like a puppet in the wind. I called 911. They asked me 100 questions. Sir, what's your exact location? Sir, is the dog injured or in immediate danger? Sir, is anyone else with you? I answered as best I could while rattling the HOA gate like a madman. The lock didn't budge. The gate didn't so much as creak. Then came the voice. You can't be back here without authorization. She stepped out from behind a bush, clipboard in hand, sunglasses like twin satellites scanning my sins. Brenda, HOA president. 74 years old, 5 feet tall, all rage and bylaws. She wore a wide-brimmed visor and a fanny pack like it was military gear. I'd seen her ruin a teenager's birthday party because the balloons were not within the earth tone palette. I pointed toward the cliff. My dog is going to die. She looked, squinted, tilted her head like she was considering a bird feeder, not a living animal dangling off a damn cliff. Do you have a permit for animal retrieval in common HOA zones? She asked. That's not a question a sane person asks. I blinked. What? She pulled a laminated sheet from her clipboard. Under Section 3B, Paragraph 14 of the Emergency Access Use Protocol, no entry is permitted beyond this gate without formal authorization signed by a member of the board and approved by, Lady, he's going to fall. Then you should have kept him leashed properly, she said, tapping the sign. This is why we have rules. I started yelling. I yelled a lot. I won't lie to you, there were F-bombs. There were threats of legal action, of public shame, of personal karma. There were comparisons to dictators. She didn't flinch. Brenda had the emotional skin of a rhinoceros. I've seen her fine a war veteran for wind chimes. Meanwhile, Barnaby barked again. It was weaker now. The leash looked like it might snap. The bush was shaking. I told the dispatcher again that we needed help now, that the gate was locked and an HOA official was obstructing emergency rescue. Sir, the voice said calmly, we have units en route. Do not attempt to scale the fence. Do not confront anyone. Remain calm. Remain calm. That's like telling a man not to punch a bear when it's mauling his kid. But I didn't punch. I didn't climb. I begged. Brenda, for the love of God, just open the gate. Let them in. She pursed her lips like she was holding back a belch of judgment. We can't allow emergency services to damage HOA property without a waiver on file. There's a dog dying. She shrugged. It's not personal. It's policy. Let me tell you something, brother. Policy is the new religion. And people like Brenda, they're the high priests. They don't need logic, heart, or common sense. Just a rulebook and a sense of purpose. And nothing gives them more purpose than denial. Denying a swing set. Denying a paint color. Denying oxygen if it doesn't match the HOA air quality standards. I stepped back. Called again. Same dispatcher. I told her I would cut the gate myself. I had bolt cutters in the garage. She asked me not to. And then came the sound. A whump 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 in the air. The unmistakable rhythm of rotor blades. A chopper. Low and fast. I didn't call for that. But someone must have. Or maybe it was divine intervention. A gift from the god of dogs and decency. The dispatcher confirmed. Search and rescue was airborne. ETA 3 minutes. Brenda's eyes narrowed. They don't have aerial clearance in this zone. I didn't answer. I was already running back, yelling at my neighbor Chad to grab the bolt cutters. The ladder, the old military harness I'd kept from my service days in the closet marked, "Do not touch," because if Brenda wouldn't open the gate, I'd find a way over it, or around it, or above it. Barnaby didn't have time for forms. He didn't have the luxury of bureaucracy, and neither did I. Not anymore. Let me tell you something else, friend. After 60 years of taxes, laws, rules, and respectability, there's a moment, just one, where a man says, enough. Enough of being reasonable while others hide behind nonsense. Enough of smiling while they slam the gate in your face. That moment hit me mid-sprint. It hit me as I passed the hedge Brenda once threatened to sue me over for being visually erratic. It hit me as I yelled at a helicopter midair. I'm the one. I'll go down. Just drop the damn rope. And it hit me when I realized I wasn't just rescuing a dog. I was rescuing my right to act, to matter, in a world that keeps telling men like us we're only useful if we shut up, sit down, and pay the HOA fees on time. Well, not today. Today I had a harness. Today I had a chopper. And today I was done asking for permission. I don't know if you've ever stared into the face of a person who genuinely believes they're saving civilization by blocking a rescue operation. But I have. Her name is Brenda Murchison, age 74, 5 feet of concentrated HOA authority, standing like a granite pillar in front of that locked steel gate, arms crossed, clipboard clenched, and a smugness so thick you could pour syrup on it. I had always suspected she got off on control, but that day removed all doubt. She wasn't just enforcing a rule. She was delighting in it. The helicopter hadn't landed yet, but its blades were close enough now to rattle every window on the block. The sky above was filled with noise and urgency. That rhythmic whup 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 pulsed in my chest like war drums. Barnaby's barks had faded. His leash, looped awkwardly around that brittle bush, jerked with uneven spasms. Time was leaking out, minute by minute, and all I could think about was how we got here. Not just me and Barnaby and Brenda, but all of us, this entire country, where a woman with a laminated badge and zero empathy could hold life hostage with a padlock. A patrol car finally rolled up, blue and red lights flashing like it was prom night for authority. Officer Dwyer stepped out, late 50s maybe, chewing gum like it owed him rent. He looked more annoyed than alarmed. I ran over, breathless, trying to shout over the roar of the approaching chopper. I pointed, pleaded. I waved toward the ridge. Sir, he said calmly, please take a step back and explain what's going on. I explained. Again, slower this time because apparently a man shouting about a dangling dog, a locked gate, and a woman quoting bylaws sounds a little unhinged unless you spell it out like a bedtime story. As I spoke, Dwyer kept glancing at Brenda, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Not sympathy, no, that would have been too human, but caution. The kind of caution people have when they know they're dealing with someone litigious. Brenda tapped her clipboard like a gavel. I've already informed emergency services that this area is off-limits without pre-approved clearance from the HOA executive board. The dog is about to fall off a cliff. I barked back. She smiled, and I swear her eyes twinkled. And I sympathize. But rules are rules. That phrase. That damn phrase. Rules are rules. It's what cowards say when they want to feel powerful. It's what bullies use to disguise control as duty. I looked at Dwyer. He was hesitating. Not because he didn't believe me. Not because he didn't care. But because he knew she might sue. She had done it before. Last year, she took a neighbor to small claims court over an unapproved lawn flamingo. I turned to Chad, who had just jogged over carrying the bolt cutters I'd asked him to grab earlier. He was sweating like a pig on Sunday, wearing socks with sandals and a faded t-shirt that said, "Don't California my Texas." Not the guy you expect to bring hero energy into a crisis, but that morning, Chad became my partner in rebellion. "You cutting the damn thing or what?" he asked. I looked at Dwyer. He looked at Brenda. Brenda raised her eyebrows. Tampering with HOA infrastructure is a felony under Municipal Code 13.6 subsection. Yeah, I know the song," Chad muttered and raised the cutters. Dwyer stepped forward. "Sir, I have to advise against." "Then arrest me," I snapped. "But after we get the dog off that cliff." And that was it. No dramatic music, no movie slow-mo. Just two old guys, one with bolt cutters, one with a rope harness, deciding they'd had enough of the nonsense. Chad snipped the padlock like it was a strand of overcooked spaghetti. The gate creaked open with a long, metallic groan that sounded like liberation. Brenda screamed. Actually screamed. "You are in violation. I will be pressing." "Lady, write it down," I barked back. "Use a fancy pen if it helps." The path to the cliffside was rough and sloped steep. My knees were already protesting every step, but adrenaline does strange things to a man's body. It makes you 20 years younger and 10 times dumber. I strapped the harness on, tightened it like I was going in behind enemy lines, and waved at the helicopter above, now hovering in place. One of the rescue techs leaned out, tossed a line, and I caught it like I'd done it 100 times. Which, to be fair, I hadn't. Not since '78. Barnaby was still there, still alive, still kicking weakly. The ground around him had started to crumble, a few more pebbles skittering over the edge. There wasn't much time. I yelled back, to nobody in particular, that I was going down. I wrapped the line through my harness, gave a quick nod, and felt the pull as the winch activated. The world tilted. My feet left the ground. Now look, I haven't dangled from anything taller than a stepladder in decades, but I'll tell you what, once you're airborne, once you're hanging over a godforsaken cliff with nothing but rope and regret, your mind clears up real quick. The only thing I thought about was Barnaby's eyes. Wide. Pleading. Full of that same dumb loyalty dogs always give us even when we don't deserve it. I lowered down, inch by inch, barking instructions at the tech above me. The wind whipped my face. Dust filled my eyes. My hands shook, but I kept going. Closer. Almost there. Barnaby whined once, as if he recognized me. I swung left, landed awkwardly, scrabbled across the rock, and looped my arms under his body. "You're okay, buddy. I got you." I clipped the carabiner to his collar, double-checked the harness, and gave the rescue guy the thumbs up. The winch kicked back in, and we lifted together, man and dog, back up toward the sky, leaving the pit of stupidity behind us. By the time we were back on solid ground, a crowd had formed. Phones out, cameras rolling, neighbors whispering. Brenda stood off to the side, red-faced and fuming, as if the very act of rescue had violated her sense of order. Dwyer tried to look neutral, but he couldn't hide the tiny grin twitching at the corner of his mouth. "You're both under investigation," Brenda hissed. "Great," I said, petting Barnaby's head. "Investigate this. We're alive." You know what got to me most? Not the danger. Not even the absurdity. What got to me was how normal this kind of obstruction has become. How a gate, a damn gate, can become a symbol for every way a system tries to neuter basic human decency. How people like Brenda, hiding behind policies, can delay action in the name of procedure. We used to be a nation of doers. Now we're a nation of form fillers, permission seekers, afraid of violating rule #43C on page 97 of a manual nobody reads but everybody fears. But not today. Today we broke the lock. Today we rescued something more than just a dog. We rescued the idea that sometimes you don't wait for permission. You do what's right. And damn the bylaws. That night, I sat on my porch, a beer in hand, Barnaby curled up at my feet, snoring. I watched the stars and thought about the gate, the broken padlock, the scream, the flight, the fall. And I realized we didn't just save Barnaby. We reminded a neighborhood that courage still matters, that action still counts, that not every problem needs a meeting. Sometimes it just needs bolt cutters. They say every neighborhood has one guy who doesn't give a damn about the HOA, the rules, the whispers, the meetings. In our case, that guy was Skyscraper Steve. If you've never met a man like Steve, imagine someone who owns 3 lawnmowers but no lawn, a blowtorch in his truck, and a garage with enough steel cable and climbing gear to make the fire department look under-equipped. Steve wasn't just the guy you called when something broke. He was the guy you called when something broke the rules, and you wanted it done anyway. I hadn't seen him in over a year. He mostly kept to himself after his drone display during the 4th of July got him banned from HOA gatherings in perpetuity. But when the story of Barnaby and the gate and the helicopter spread like grease fire down the neighborhood grapevine, Steve was on my porch before sundown, holding a 12-pack of Bud and a look on his face like Christmas had come early. "So," he said, cracking a beer with one hand and rubbing his chin with the other, "you went full airborne rescue on HOA turf. That's legendary." I told him I didn't have a choice. I told him the dog was slipping and the gate was locked and Brenda was quoting bylaws like she was reciting scripture. He took a long sip, nodded slowly, and leaned back in his chair. "That's the thing about these people, Mike. You try to talk reason, they hand you a pamphlet. You try to act, they give you a fine. You try to live, they give you a warning letter in Comic Sans. You did what needed doing." And then he said the words that would kick off the next phase of this madness. "But we ain't done yet." I asked him what he meant. He smiled like a man about to light a fuse. "They filed a formal grievance. Brenda's got a petition circulating to have you removed from the HOA. She's calling it a hostile undermining of bylaw authority. Which, if that doesn't sound like a North Korean charge, I don't know what does." He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his back pocket. It was a printed copy of a neighborhood group chat. Highlighted lines read, "We cannot tolerate vigilante behavior, irresponsible use of emergency services." And my personal favorite, "Setting a dangerous precedent that gates don't matter. Gates don't matter. Jesus." It's like they think the gate was sacred. Like Brenda's lock was the final defense against chaos and wild lawn ornaments. Steve leaned in. "You know what that means, right? They're gonna call a meeting, public hearing, HOA tribunal, whatever you want to call it. And you're the villain of the week." I laughed at first. I thought he was joking. But the next morning, there it was, an official envelope taped to my front door like some kind of eviction scroll. Notice of special session. Allegations of HOA code violation and emergency protocol breach. Time, Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Location, HOA clubhouse. Dress code, business casual. Steve read it over my shoulder, then muttered, "They're trying to crucify you in khakis." Chad dropped by around noon. His wife had already heard about the session from Brenda's niece who posted it on her Essential Oils Facebook group. Brad, our neighbor 2 houses down, showed up next, carrying a set of folding chairs and a smirk. "You're about to be the main event, buddy," he said. "Hope you've got a speech ready." But I didn't have a speech. I wasn't planning to make one. I didn't want to turn this into a war. I just wanted peace. And maybe for my dog to stop having dreams where he barked at imaginary cliffs. Still, something about the whole thing gnawed at me. These people, this board, they weren't just upset. They were offended that someone had dared to act outside the lines. Even if it saved a life. Even if it hurt no one. Even if the only thing truly broken was a $10 lock and Brenda's pride. That evening, Steve pulled me aside. You know what this is really about, right? It ain't the gate. It ain't the dog. It's control. It's about people who never had power in their lives, suddenly finding themselves with a rulebook and a captive audience. And when someone doesn't kneel to it, they freak. He was right. Somewhere along the line, the HOA stopped being about safety and started being about submission. It stopped being a community and started being a code enforcement agency with bake sales. And so, against every better judgment, I found myself agreeing to Steve's plan. We don't just show up, he said. We remind them who the hell we are. What followed was, in hindsight, both brilliant and ridiculous. Steve, Chad, and Brad called it Operation Front Porch. The day before the hearing, they printed flyers, hundreds of them. Bold red letters read, "Support Chopper Dad. Save common sense." They taped them to lampposts, trash bins, mailboxes. Brad set up a lemonade stand next to Brenda's lawn with a tip jar labeled Legal Defense Fund for men who love dogs. It made $42 before she threatened to call the city. By the time Thursday night rolled around, I wasn't nervous. I was ready, not because I wanted a fight, but because I finally realized it wasn't just my fight. It was every man in the neighborhood who'd been fined for the color of his patio chair. Every guy who'd been written up for a flagpole 2 inches too tall. Every father who'd been told his daughter's sidewalk chalk was non-compliant. The clubhouse was packed. Rows of folding chairs. That awful fluorescent lighting. A whiteboard with bullet points like reckless conduct and gate damage estimate. Brenda sat at the center table, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I took my seat up front, Barnaby at my side. In a little vest Steve had made that read, "Rescue survivors still not sorry." Brenda cleared her throat. "We'll begin with a reading of the charges." That's when the door opened, and in walked Steve, wearing an old firefighter's jacket, sunglasses, and carrying a goddamn boombox playing Fortunate Son. The room froze. He saluted Brenda, dropped the music, and said, "Just here to support my commander-in-chief." The room erupted in laughter. Even some board members chuckled. Brenda, of course, did not. What happened next isn't a Hollywood ending. They didn't lift the charges. They didn't offer me a plaque. But something shifted. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't need a speech. I just told the truth. About a dog, a cliff, a gate, and a man tired of asking permission to do the right thing. When I finished, there was a pause. A long one. Then someone clapped. Then someone else. Then the whole room. Brenda banged her gavel like it was an exorcism. "This is a hearing, not a pep rally," she yelled. But the hearing was over. Not because of votes. Not because of policy. But because people remembered what it meant to be neighbors again. That night, back on my porch, Steve handed me another beer. "You're not just Chopper Dad anymore," he said. "You're the guy who made us remember the gate ain't what matters." I looked at Barnaby, snoring on my boots, and smiled. "Damn right," I said. "What matters is knowing when to kick it open." The morning after the hearing, I woke up expecting trouble. Not trouble in the metaphorical sense, but real, full-bore, HOA brand retribution. I half expected to find my lawn spray painted with non-compliant or a cease and desist letter duct-taped to my mailbox. Instead, I found Barnaby dragging a plastic garden gnome across the yard like a war trophy. The gnome, I recognized immediately, belonged to Brenda, which meant it had probably blown into my yard during the windstorm last night, or maybe Barnaby had developed a taste for poetic justice. Either way, I took it as a sign. Brenda hadn't won. Not really. Sure, the board hadn't dropped the charges, but they hadn't exactly backed her either. And more importantly, the people had made up their minds. Neighbors who wouldn't make eye contact last month were waving now. Dads I'd never spoken to were giving me nods of respect. One guy, a Vietnam vet named Alan with a prosthetic leg and a grudge against bureaucracy, dropped off a six-pack and a hand-scrawled note that read, "For the first time in years, someone stood up and didn't fold." Cheers. You don't forget something like that. The shift was quiet, but undeniable, and it scared the hell out of Brenda. The next week, she tripled down. New signs went up across the community. Unauthorized flyers prohibited. Noise curfew strictly enforced. She even tried to start a committee to regulate front yard tone and expression. Whatever that meant. Chad called it the HOA Patriot Act. Brad started referring to her house as Checkpoint Brenda. Meanwhile, Steve had other plans. "You've rattled the cage," he told me. "Now let's see what falls out." He wanted to launch something called Porch Liberty Day, a neighborhood-wide event where everyone would break at least one minor HOA rule in unison. Fly a flag too high. Grill in the front yard. Paint one brick the wrong color. It was part protest, part barbecue. I laughed when he suggested it. But 2 hours later, he'd already printed flyers, built a website, and recruited 3 retirees from the next street over. The man was a one-man freedom factory. And like all great ideas in suburbia, it snowballed. The guys from the Wednesday poker group brought in a smoker big enough to roast a small deer. Retired Air Force pilot Hank volunteered to buzz the neighborhood in his ultralight plane trailing a banner that read, "Free the Grill." Even Ed, a 79-year-old former tax attorney who once filed a motion to remove his HOA dues, showed up with a boombox and a playlist titled Songs Brenda Hates. The day arrived hot, loud, and unapologetic. From sunrise to sunset, the air smelled of burgers and rebellion. Children ran barefoot. Dads played cornhole shirtless. Someone inflated a bounce house with an American flag roof. Brenda stood on her porch, clutching binoculars and taking notes like a field commander preparing for litigation. At one point, she called the sheriff's department, but they didn't show. Steve said it was because one of the deputies had attended the hearing and dropped off a Chopper Dad t-shirt the next day. Around mid-afternoon, I noticed a group gathering near the clubhouse. It wasn't official, no gavel, no agenda, but people were talking. And not in hushed, careful tones like before. They were venting, sharing stories. A guy named Martin told us how he was fined $300 for having a political bumper sticker visible from the street. A young couple admitted they were scared to plant flowers because they couldn't afford another violation. And then an old-timer, Bill I think, stood up and said what none of us had dared to say outright. The HOA's supposed to protect us, not rule us. That did it. That one sentence shifted everything. People cheered, not wildly, but with the weight of built-up frustration finally given voice. I saw Brenda standing on the edge of the crowd, red-faced, eyes darting like a cornered animal. She didn't say a word. She turned and walked away. That night, the fireworks started. Not sanctioned ones, of course. Illegal, glorious, backyard rockets that lit the sky like we'd declared independence from petty authority. Barnaby, terrified but determined, sat beside me with those oversized earmuffs Steve had made out of foam and duct tape. He was a war dog now, a veteran, a symbol of the fight, and he seemed to know it. Steve plopped into the lawn chair beside me, beer in hand, and raised it in salute. "To small acts of rebellion," he said, "and to the people who remember they're still allowed to do something." I looked around. Neighbors laughing, talking, connecting. Kids painting chalk murals on the sidewalk. Murals that violated no less than 4 HOA clauses. And I realized something we'd changed. Not the bylaws, not yet. But the spirit, the tone, the damn heartbeat of the neighborhood. It wasn't about me, or Barnaby, or even Brenda. It was about remembering that being part of a community doesn't mean surrendering your voice to a checklist. The next morning, an anonymous letter was dropped in my mailbox, typed and signed, but unmistakably from someone on the board. It read, "We may not agree with your methods, but you reminded us what matters. Consider the hearing closed. No fines. No further action. Stay safe. Keep the dog out of the bushes." That was it. No apology. No ceremony. Just a quiet admission that maybe, just maybe, they'd gone too far. Brenda didn't speak to me for weeks. And when she finally did, it was one sentence, delivered with the tight-lipped fury of a woman who just watched her kingdom crack. I hope your dog knows what he started. I smiled. He's figuring it out. That evening, I sat on the porch again. The neighborhood was quieter now, but not subdued. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a good thunderstorm. Cleansed, fresh, alive. Barnaby lay curled beside me, ears twitching at every distant bark. The sky turned a deep purple. I leaned back, sipped my beer, and thought, maybe this is what winning looks like now. Not parades, not headlines, just a man and his dog on a porch the HOA once tried to silence, in a neighborhood that remembered its spine. Maybe freedom's not loud. Maybe it's just stubborn. Maybe it's showing up again and again until the gate breaks. Not because you hate rules, but because you still believe in what they're supposed to be for. It's a strange thing, waking up in a neighborhood that's finally started breathing again. Not just existing, not just humming under the rules like a trapped fly under a glass, breathing. Real air, real life. There was something different about the morning after all of it. It wasn't louder. It wasn't quieter. It was just freer. Like every fence felt less like a cage and more like a suggestion. Like every man who once hunched behind a garage door now walked his dog a little taller. Even Barnaby, that scrappy little mutt who started it all, moved through the yard with the swagger of a decorated veteran. You'd never guess he was the same dog who nearly tumbled off a cliff while a woman with a clipboard read bylaws over his screams. But the past has a way of hardening the right parts of you and softening others. I had thought, maybe foolishly, that after the so-called Porch Liberty Day and the spontaneous hearing shutdown, things would level out. But I underestimated two things: the endurance of petty tyrants and the wildfire power of a good story. Because the story didn't stop in the neighborhood. It leaked out. First, it was a post on Nextdoor, just a blurry photo of Barnaby in his rescue vest, standing proud on my porch. Then someone's niece turned it into a meme. When HOA says no, but Chopper Dad says go. Then it hit Reddit. Then Facebook. Then came the local news van. The reporter was in his 20s, all teeth and hair gel and enthusiasm, like he still thought the world was watching. He asked me questions while Barnaby sniffed his mic stand. "Do you think you violated community rules?" he asked. I looked him square in the eye and said, "Son, if I have to choose between rules and a living being dangling off a cliff, you can find me after the funeral." The clip went viral. And I mean viral. National. I didn't know what going viral felt like until the phone wouldn't stop ringing and Amazon sent me a message saying someone was selling Chopper Dad t-shirts using my name. I didn't even know I had a brand. Suddenly, I was getting emails from people in other states, guys like me. Retired, overlooked, done being pushed around by systems built more for control than community. One guy in Arizona sent me a photo of his HOA gate covered in protest post-its. Another man in Pennsylvania wrote that he'd used bolt cutters for the first time since '82 to free a trapped raccoon, and felt damn alive. But not everyone was cheering. Brenda, who'd been momentarily quiet after her public humiliation, reemerged like a bad reboot. She'd filed a formal request for HOA legal review, citing permanent reputational harm, and claiming the media attention had created an unsafe and destabilizing narrative that glorifies civil disobedience. Her words, not mine, and she wasn't alone. A small, but vocal group began to whisper online about restoring order. You know the type. The ones who think every front yard should look like a country club and that paint color deviation is moral collapse. I call them the Beige Brigade. They wanted Brenda back in power. They wanted to rewrite the bylaws tighter, stricter, with clauses to prevent unauthorized acts of rescue and property damage in response to animal incidents. I wasn't surprised. Every movement gets its pushback. For every neighbor who found his spine, there's one who prefers the leash. But here's the thing, they were too late, because something had shifted and no rulebook could duct tape it shut. The turning point came during the community potluck, a quiet event meant to cool tensions. Brenda tried to host it herself. Plastic tablecloths, gluten-free everything, and an ominous poster that read, "Celebrating HOA Unity." But halfway through the potluck, something happened that no one planned. A kid, maybe 9 or 10, climbed up on the little platform in front of the clubhouse, microphone in hand. He was small, freckled, missing a front tooth. "My dog almost died once," he said. "He got stuck in a pipe behind our fence. Mr. Michael helped me pull him out. And I think people who help shouldn't get in trouble." That kid didn't know it, but he cracked something open. There was a silence, long and heavy. Not awkward, reverent. Then the clapping started. Slow, then faster, then from all directions. It wasn't about me. It was about what I reminded them of. About a time when help wasn't permission-based. When neighbors weren't policy enforcers but people you could call when the world got scary. Brenda left early that night. No one stopped her. No one clapped. And not long after, she resigned. Quietly. No speech. No final email blast. Just a brief note slipped into the bulletin board at the clubhouse. "I wish this community well. We all knew better." She didn't wish us well. But she couldn't stop the tide. The board changed. Younger folks stepped in. Older ones too. Men like Alan, the Vietnam vet, who ran unopposed and said during his first meeting, "I'm here to make sure no one gets fined for painting joy on their front door." A few months later, the bylaws were amended. Nothing radical, just human. Common sense stuff. Gates must open during emergencies. Rescue attempts are not subject to punitive review. And the new clause, any act of kindness that results in minor property damage will be reviewed under the principle of good faith. They called it the Barnaby Clause. Fitting, really. He still doesn't understand any of it. To him, life is a series of smells and naps and squirrels that must be stopped. But he knows peace. He knows love. And sometimes, when we sit on the porch at sunset, I swear he listens for the sound of rotors in the distance, just to make sure we're ready. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who got tired of standing still while someone read the rulebook louder than my conscience. I didn't mean to start anything. But if you're still reading this, still nodding along, maybe you're ready to start something too. Not a war. Not a protest. Just a small, stubborn refusal to be quiet when the thing that needs doing is right in front of you. Maybe it's a stuck dog. Maybe it's a locked gate. Maybe it's something bigger. Whatever it is, remember this. Rules are not holy. Paper doesn't trump people. And when the system forgets what it's for, it's not rebellion to remind it. It's responsibility. So yeah, maybe I'll always be Chopper Dad now. Maybe that'll show up on Google before my real name. That's fine by me. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the most American thing you can do is climb over a fence someone told you not to touch. And pull somebody back to safety.